welcome to everybody. And John, we'll just kind of thank our audience and thank this distinguished panel for coming to our great university and really trying to chart a path forward of understanding and discourse and dialogue. And of course, with that as our goal, I'm going to have you ask the first question.
Well, it's a quiet news week. So I don't think there'll be much going on as the week unfolds. But on the off chance that something happens on Friday, here we are, 8 years after a milestone in which the first African American becomes President of the United States, a moment that I think a lot of us, at least as a white Southerner, I thought would take a lot longer than it did. Is going to get on what will not be Marine One anymore, and then we'll get on what is not Air Force One anymore, and leave Washington. 8 years on, do you think...
He's actually not leaving Washington. He's moving across the street.
He's going to Palm Springs.
Palm Springs for a couple weeks first, and then...
Yeah, I mean, if you had the choice, I would go to Palm Springs. In fact, Chancellor, I would like to go.
I'll go with you. Okay.
That's all.
We'll get a fourth.
8 years. But 8 years on, looking at race relations in particular, are we better off, worse off, the same? Joshua, you were there.
John, the response that most people would give is that we're worse off. We see the protesting in the streets. We obviously saw what just happened in this election. We see a renewed Southern strategy that has somehow gone national in terms of engaging people around their greatest fears rather than their hopes. But the reason why I think that this period has been an important step and why we may look back and say we're better off on race is because the president really held a mirror up to the American psyche on race so we can finally see who and what we really are. You can't deal with an issue until it's on the table. It was almost like an X-ray has been presented to us and saying, here are the issues, here are the problems. We've had 350 years of really, really tough stuff in this country on race, and just right around 50 or 60 where we've begun to figure things out. And so it sort of makes sense that we needed this X-ray period. And so I think the response most people will give is that we're worse off, but at least it's on the table, and we can't deal with something until it's on the table.
Yeah. Huh?
I think it's both. I think we're better off in some aspects. I think we're worse off in some aspects. I think we are better off in the sense that you cannot take away from President Barack Obama his legacy of being the first black president, and that we broke that glass ceiling as a nation, as folks that do have racial divisions, is a huge, huge accomplishment of enormous significance. We can disagree on issues like his healthcare policy, his immigration policy, his legacy on foreign policy. We cannot disagree on that this man broke the glass ceiling for African Americans and made huge strides on that aspect for this entire nation and the world. When I think of his legacy and I think of the 160-year-old African American woman who came to visit him and danced with him and Michelle Obama in the White House. She'd never been to the White House. She said, I never thought I would live to see a black president. And there she was dancing with him. I think about images like the little black boy who went to visit him in the Oval Office and asked him, is your hair like mine? And President Obama stooped down and let him touch his hair. And in fact, it was like him. And what it means for little black girls and little black boys all over the country to know that one day they can unequivocally grow up to be president. So hell yes, that's better off. Now, it's also worse off in the sense that I think a lot of people criticized Obama based on racism. A lot of people criticized Obama legitimately and were called on it because they were told that it was racism. I think it deepened the divides. He had a heavier burden to bear on racial issues. I think a lot of people were disappointed. And it's been a very difficult period for America. We have seen so many race-motivated events, black on black, white on black, black on white, in the last 8 years, and we've seen it really for the first time in real time and televised, and I think it's been a very difficult period, and it has deepened the divide.
I think in a lot of respects, for me, it kind of boils down to an expectation game. There was, during the course of the campaign, an expectation that the election of the first African-American president would begin to heal old wounds, address old scores that hadn't been settled, and just a whole lot of stuff that as a nation we just kind of put up on the cupboard shelf and thought we dealt with it. After all, we had a civil rights march. We had Martin Luther King on the Mall who told us he had a dream, and we all kind of were down with that. We had Voting Rights Act, and we had a Civil Rights Act, and so we had all these symbols of progress that had been achieved. But what we didn't deal with was what was really going on inside our own heads, our hearts and our minds, within our communities. And I think you put it right, the reflection that is ultimately us as American citizens. So we had this expectation that this would take care of the rest of it. And you heard folks talking about, post-racial America and all this other crazy. Well, the reality of it was his election pulled the Band-Aid off of a very old and deep wound. And over the last 8 years, we've been living in that ish of that wound. And it has not been pleasant. It has been ugly because guess what? We now see who we are. We now have a better sense of what we feel and what we believe. And regardless of how enlightened you thought you were when Barack Obama became president, some of us sort of, the bulbs went out. And we weren't as enlightened as we thought we were. We weren't as progressive as we thought we were. We weren't as prepared as we thought we would be for this moment. And so consequently having to deal with that became a problem. And the bottom line for me was just how honest do you want to be? If you want to talk race, let's talk race. You want to have that conversation? You ready? Because I don't think you are. I really don't think you are. White folks are nervous as hell about the changing of this country, what it looks like demographically, what it looks like politically, where it's going economically, socially. Black folks are nervous as hell. They're looking over their shoulders at Hispanics because they're like, well, they're taking my job. Hispanics are nervous and concerned because not only can't they get in the country, but once they get here, everyone's trying to put them out. So you have all these dynamics that are going on at a very base level that as a nation called America, as Americans, I ask the question, are you ready to have the conversation? Because if you are, I'm ready. But you better be prepared for what comes when you have that conversation, because it's not pretty. And it's not something that's cozy and comfortable. And it shouldn't be, because you're unwrapping 400 years of history, 400 years of attitudes and behavior that you're not going to get fixed just because you did a march on the mall, or you're not going to solve just because someone had a dream. And at the end of the day, Barack Obama is not the person who's going to solve that with a great speech. It's in our communities. It's in our neighborhoods.
Yeah. Given that, given that most of our conversations now take place in 140 characters from Trump Tower, that's a little worrisome. Place this in some historical context. There is an American tendency to overcorrect, right? So you have George Herbert Walker Bush, the most, I believe it's okay to be a repressed WASP, obviously, but the most repressed WASP you can imagine, and you get Bill Clinton. You have Bill Clinton, and then you get George W. Bush. You have George W. Bush, and you get Barack Obama. You have Barack Obama, but man, did we have to overcorrect this much.
Well,
And he is the nominee, I had to say this, Mr. Chairman, he is the nominee of your party, the party you led.
he is a nominee of my party, and he is the president for all of us. And this is
Right.
This is the end of the day. I mean, I just love how this unfolds. I mean, it's like, you got Republicans kind of running and hiding about, oh yeah, I had nothing to do with that vote.
Which is crazy because when it's all said and done, yes, Hillary Clinton got more votes, but that's not how we elect the President of the United States. Everyone is finding ways to explain, excuse, and discount what happened. The American people, in my estimation, over the last, and this is particularly true when you stop and look at someone you probably know very well, his name is Bubba, and you talked about Bill Clinton. I mean, you chronicled this and you know it, that, you had this voter who basically has been sitting at home watching the world pass him by for the last 30 years. And it was, for me, the way I imaged this is Donald Trump walks onto the television, comes on the television. First off, remember this, Donald Trump has been talking to these voters for the last 20 plus years. He is the author, the designer, the creative reality television. I mean, they glued into his sort of mindset. He helped shape that mindset. So he translates that into politics. And all of a sudden, the voter who was sitting back like this, like, I don't give a damn about George Bush, I don't give a damn about Barack Obama, I don't give a damn about, any of it, all of a sudden, they're like this. And then they're standing up and they're going to the television. They're like, really? And then the next thing you know, they're showing up at rallies. So he pulled this voter off of that couch, out of that space, back into the system. I remember I was on a show doing one of MSNBC, and one of the other guests was saying, well, there aren't enough white men in America to elect Donald Trump. And I went, really? Don't bet on it.
Yeah.
He found that voter, and he brought that voter out of their funk and into this space. Now, we may not be happy about it, and we don't like the way it happened, and there's a lot to contend with there. But understand the why and the how, in my view.
We have to look at what he said to those voters.
Yeah.
I think it's critically important to realize that the message that he was either whispering in their ears or
No, he wasn't
proclaiming
whispering, he was straight up.
from a podium at a rally was all of the problems that you've had while you've been sitting on the sidelines, they're because of those people and those people and those people and those brown people and those black people and those people behind that wall that want to get in and those people in here that we need to push out and those Muslims and he deployed in a masterful way the most divisive campaign in modern American history. And we now are confronted with the fact that this is going to be our president, and people are saying, well, let's give him a chance, let's see what he does. But every week, he shows us once again, what did Maya Angelou say? When people show you who they are, believe them. John Lewis, Nashville? John Lewis?
Yeah.
And so it's a deeply troubling, it's a deeply troubling message that he was conveying, and I think it could take us into some pretty dark places. I hope it doesn't, but I think it could.
What, on the hope that good advice can be given and taken, does the new administration with President Trump try to have a path forward that is different? I mean, what would you advise him to do? He's kind of like, this has always worked. Is there a way to try to, if not have the conversation, Michael, at least acknowledge that there are other people who feel disenfranchised, who feel that I didn't get to vote or my voice doesn't count, to heal the nation? Is that possible?
As we've seen, anything's possible.
Well, yeah.
No, I don't think Donald Trump looks at it that way. Going back to what you were just saying, Donald Trump didn't put this idea in these voters' head. All he did was speak to it. So it goes back to the opening question and the comments around, the issue of race and how we deal with it. Okay, we outwardly deal with it one way, but how do we really feel about it? And so for a lot of these voters, it just was a reflection he was a reflection of how they felt about where the country was headed, what the country was going through. And he was the only one who was just keeping it real. And you just call it, call it what it was. Now, that doesn't mean that those same voters would then take on a Gold Star family, okay? There are lines, there are bright lines they wouldn't cross. But I think on the sort of the elemental level, they went with him. I guess there are 2 points that really kind of firm that up for me. The first was, and you probably saw this at a certain point, the focus group that was done in New Hampshire, in which this was back in the early fall, you probably saw it as well, in which they asked, folks, do you like Donald Trump? And this woman, white female entrepreneur or, lady, family, the whole deal, said, oh yeah, no, he's one of us. He's just like me. Really? How is this billionaire just like this working mom? And a lot of people sort of focused on the top line and didn't peel down to understand exactly what she was saying. And it wasn't that, oh yeah, I'm a billionaire and he's a billionaire, or I want to be a billionaire like him. It was like, no, he's speaking my language. He's reflecting how I feel about stuff. I'm really concerned about the immigration laws in this country. I'm really concerned about the fact that my husband now has to work 2 part-time jobs. I'm really concerned about, so all of those things he kind of spoke to. And in it, sort of brought out all these other pieces that you were talking about. And so in terms of his looking at this, I don't think he looks at this as so much concern about how people are feeling about what he's saying.
Yeah.
Look, I think his great talent, I think he did in politics what he does in real estate. He basically took a movement and he put the Trump brand on it. Same way that somebody else builds the building and he puts
That's
the
right.
Trump name on it.
That's right.
What he was able to do, that 16 other Republicans running in the primary were not able to do, was that he was able to respond quickly, to sense what was out there in the base, and to implement it in a fast way, a lot of it through Twitter. I think that when he launched his campaign June 16, 2015, the first thing he did was, talk about Mexicans as rapists and criminals, and said Mexico was not sending its best people. I think the next day he was ready to apologize. Certainly his kids were, because they were selling clothes at Macy's, and La Raza was about to start protesting, and La Raza was about to start protesting NBC and The Apprentice and all of this, and it was going to cost him money. But then lo and behold, it turns out Mikey liked the cornflakes. The next day he woke up to learn that the Republican base actually liked what he said. And he doubled down on it. He never apologized, which was a precedent that carried him throughout the campaign, whether he was attacking the Gold Star family, or the disabled reporter, or John McCain, or POWs, or making fun about the little wafer and the little wine.
We
He
only have
never
an hour.
apologized.
Yeah.